Hello, hello. Welcome to What's Working Now. Super excited to be here with you today. Today, we have the awesome and the amazing Greg Kimball. Greg, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be exciting.
Well, it is exciting because we're actually in person. This is not a Zoom call. We are physically across the table from each other. I just kicked your knee, I think.
But that's refreshing because you can't kick my knee if we're on Zoom.
Yes. So we are here in person. I was here for a client's wedding, and hello, I'm coming back in a month to do your awesome and incredible event, the Final Percent.
Yes.
And I wanted to have a chance to really get to know you and to get to know your story, because every time I talk to you, it's full-on inspiration, and your intention for sharing everything is not about hey world, look at me, I'm Greg Kimball. It's very much there's greatness in you and let me help you see it.
It's so true.
So tell our listeners, give everybody kind of a little bit of a background about you.
So I started off as a singer. So I love singing. I love music. I think that music can transform lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that music is incredibly important, and it's kind of a universal language.
Yeah.
It's also an incredibly hard industry to quote unquote make it in.
Sure.
But when I started the entertainment business, I realized that I wanted to, instead of be in front of the camera or on stage, I kept finding myself on what's called the other side of the glass, and that's in the recording studio. And I was the kid, because I went in when I was 15 doing my own record, and I had a producer, I had an engineer, and every single time I'd get done singing, I'd run into the studio, and then they'd be adding compression, or they'd be adding EQ, or they're adding this. I'm like, what's that doing? And why'd you do that? And this. And I wasn't just saying, what is that? I'd say, why did you do that? What made you want to add that effect? And so, quite frankly, quickly I became annoying, but I started understanding the signal flow of a recording studio, and I realized that, for sound, for instance, on this podcast, I'm talking into a microphone, and it goes through a preamp, it gets saved on a card, then it gets uploaded into the internet, and then an RSS feed, and now you're listening to it on a podcast out of your speakers.
Yeah.
And so if one of those things doesn't work, you don't hear it. It doesn't happen. If the microphone stops working, if the batteries run out, if your cable shorts out, if your speakers aren't working, RSS feed, one number's off. And I realized that the signal flow of sound and entertainment and all these, it's the same with everything in your entire life. You do something in one area, and then something else happens in another. And so I developed a concept early on when I was motivating employees, or I was motivating different people. There's the signal flow of life. And so when I would take an action, I would realize that, oh my gosh, this would happen. But not just that for me, it had these kind of byproduct things, good and bad, because we've all been young, you made the mistakes.
Sure.
But I was always known, and so I went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences so that I could learn about the super technical stuff. But I realized even back then, I was always coaching people, sometimes without permission, which I do not recommend. Any coach out there, always make sure it does not work. They don't want it, and they don't like it.
No, they push it away.
They push it away. And so I had this nickname when I was in school called Yoda, because I was always trying to coach people.
Yeah.
And
you are a wise one, Greg. Let's be honest. You've done your own personal work, so you can help people.
True. And again, just not always with permission.
Sure.
So I learned that early on, but I had that nickname for as long as I could remember. And then every now and then, my wife and I, so kind of fast forward a little bit, my wife and I designed some colleges. And because everyone out there is trying to make their course, and they're trying to make this, and they're trying to make that. But no one's making colleges, like a brick and mortar, state approved, full on, we get government funding from the VA college. It's also, would not recommend. It's way harder than anyone realizes.
I can only imagine, really.
So I started getting called, hey, I keep getting these people when I'm trying to build a school who have only built courses, or they've only gone on a Kajabi or ClickFunnels or one of those, content dissemination platforms. But it looks like you actually built a real. So I started getting hired to go help people understand the mechanics of that. But then I couldn't help but set cultures and motivate the CEOs and help people understand new things. And then they would say, hey, you really should be a motivational speaker. And I was like, you're high. I kind of like, so again, guys, this is kind of a part 2.
Yeah.
So we just got off my podcast and I asked Katie, why are you a coach? Mm-hmm. And, she said, well, at first I didn't want to be.
I didn't want to be.
And it's funny because that's how it happened to me too. Because I feel so much better. And people were calling me for help and all these things. And, and they're like, you really need to do this. Or you should speak on stage. I was like, you are definitely crazy. Who the heck is going to come listen to me? I can sing on stage. That I was used to. Speaking, you're crazy. And one thing that happened to me at a conference at 10X1, I actually won a ticket because I told my story on one of Grant Cardone's lives.
Okay.
He gave me a ticket, one of the front row. I think I was in the second row. And but we still had to buy Kayla's ticket and the plane ticket and the hotel and all of those things. So there's still a huge, what I call life investment into it. And I went there to get better at my business. I went there to learn strategies, learn tactics. I went there to network. I went there to close some deals. Yeah. Like everybody at every conference ever.
Right.
And what happened to me was so incredible because a guy named Tim Story walked out on stage, didn't sell anything from stage, and it was like he punched me in my soul, in my heart, and rearranged what I thought was possible.
Wow.
And at that moment, I remember looking over at my wife and I said, maybe I should stand on stage for something other than singing. Maybe I do have a story to tell. And this is why when people, like the upcoming conference you're going to speak at with me, when people say, well, why should I come? What is it? Is it a real estate conference? Is it a personal growth conference? Is it a networking conference? Is it an inspirational conference? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why you need to be there. I just know that you have to be able to take action.
Yeah.
You have to get into the room. You have to have the conversation.
Yeah.
But even then, when I said, okay, finally, maybe I'm going to do this speaking thing, I was still so scared because I was like, I don't want to just go read Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and then just, regurgitate and repackage what they've done.
Yeah.
And so it was a couple more years before I took action on it. And I was sitting with my lawyer in Casper, Wyoming. And for anybody who doesn't know what it's like, I encourage you to do this. My lawyer calls me up. He says, hey, I'm going to Casper, Wyoming. We're going to experience the totality of the eclipse. 2017, the Great American Eclipse that was happening. Number one, I'm born in Wyoming. So the answer was kind of already yes. And then, I'm a giant child. So a celestial happening, yes, I want to be there.
I will be there.
This is so fun, right? And so I remember sitting on the side of the road, and it was really interesting because I'm an eccentric musician and now an eccentric entrepreneur. So, patience being a virtue, not one of mine. So I'm sitting on the side of the road, and for anyone who doesn't know, an eclipse takes about, once it starts, it takes like 2 hours to actually happen. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting on the side of the road with, the little 25-cent glasses, and I'm looking up, basically watching Pac-Man appear in the sky, but I'm always trying to cheat it. I want to see it actually happen. The moon go in front of the sun. I want to see so every time I'm looking up, I'm constantly taking off my glasses, trying to cheat to see it. It turns out when NASA is saying don't look at the sun, they're not kidding.
Right.
Do not look at the sun. Even when 1% was there, it still felt like you could tell something was kind of happening, but even with 1% there, still felt like it was daytime. It wasn't just crazy, but you're like, something's happening. Mm-hmm. But the final percent happened, and I was able to take off my glasses, and I remember looking up, and there's this floating orb in the sky, and it looked like it was 9 o'clock on a summer's night, 360 degrees around, and the temperature dropped by 20, 30 degrees.
Yes.
And I was going...
instantly, it was the weirdest feeling.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like... Actually, you know what? If you go on to my podcast, when Katie was telling her story, I had the thought, something magical is happening.
Yeah.
That same exact feeling was what happened to me at the eclipse.
Okay.
So that's the magnitude of how powerful your story is, by the way. But I recognized that something magical, I just didn't know what I was supposed to do with the information. Mm-hmm. And so I came back to Denver, and I let people know, oh my God, I just witnessed, this crazy thing happen. And they were telling me these crazy things like, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
That was so cool. And I was like, oh, did you go to Casper to see it? And they're like, no, I stayed in Denver and we had like 99% coverage. And I was like, so you have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's when it hit me that I felt like God was talking to me saying, hey, here's what I was trying to show you in that moment. I'm getting goosebumps all over my body.
Yeah.
But he said to me, the final percent is the difference between night and day. The final percent is the difference, that exponential shift. But me being in education, I started looking at the percentage point, and I'm like, wait, 90% is an A minus, 95% is an A, 98% is an A plus, 97% is an A plus, 99% is an A plus. But that's when most people stop. Mm-hmm. And so I thought to myself, if I'm being a 98% husband, if I go the final percent, is there that same exponential shift in my marriage? And then if I go the final percent, is there the same exponential shift in the way that I teach people in our colleges? Mm-hmm. If I go the final percent, is there that same exponential shift in the way that I learn? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And we identified on my podcast the final percent and I was like, this is a TFP certified story, because Katie had that final percent moment where she went one more percent and everything exploded. Mm-hmm. And this principle is so true. And so when people say, you're 99% of the way there, and I'm like, that doesn't mean you're done. That means you're close. Yeah. And so when that connection happened, I started having all those conversations, and I realized I've always felt like I was a good man, and I felt like I was going always 95, 98% in my marriage and my business and this. I'm like, is there another level to this? And all I'm doing is moving up 1%, but it explodes into this exponential shift. And the answer was yes. And when I started playing full out and going 100% in all the things that I prioritize, that's when I knew I had something to say. And that's when I finally agreed to start standing on stage, and I then developed the company, The Final Percent.
So you're an embodied living example of being before doing.
Yes.
And you took those 2 years. You were like, yes, I finally have reached a point where I feel like, okay, I can imagine myself being on stage. I've listened to all these people for years. I'm ready to make that commitment. That didn't mean right now I'm going to go sign up and be on stage.
Exactly.
That meant I need to become the man who can stand on stage.
What am I going to say? Like, all I could possibly say is everything that other people have said. Yeah. So there was, I had a story, because I have a pretty crazy story.
You do?
When I moved to Denver, I unfortunately had just gotten out of an incredibly bad divorce, and I moved to Denver, and I decided to just be homeless for a year. And instead of financing a bed, which would be go in and immediately get an apartment, I financed my dreams, and I started a recording studio. And I slept in my car, or sometimes without the landlord knowing it, in the studio. Mm-hmm. I hope he doesn't listen to this, because then he's going to be like, Greg, I knew it. Because there's a couple times he's like, are there beard trimmings in our bathroom? Because my landlord owned the building, and it was in kind of a strip mall, and he was right next to me in my first studio. Wow. So when I decided, because it got so cold in Denver, a couple times I would sleep on the couch in the studio, and I would have to hide from him and kind of figure things out. Right. And there was one time he straight up asked me, are there beard trimmings are you sleeping here? No, I was just here really late. I've got a photo shoot in the morning. So I obviously had just woken up. But it's those moments that you go from, nothing and giving up everything and pressing the reset button on your entire life. And then it was interesting, because when I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and I made this decision, I remember getting in the car and driving to Denver, and at first I was like, I'm going to take over Denver. I am so awesome. I am so incredible. There is nothing that can stop me. Well, the problem with like a 18-hour car ride is you can go through a lot of mental things. So 4 hours later, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? This is so terrible. I'm actively ruining my life. 2 or 3 hours after that, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to crush this. This is going to be easy. This is easy peasy. Yeah. I'm awesome. Yeah. 2 hours after that, I'm like, I've absolutely destroyed my life. And it kind of came to a culmination when I capitulated to not being the person who wanted to come in and kind of do the fake it till you make it like we had talked about. And it was because I was coming up over Vail Pass. And when I was going up over Vail Pass, I realized that they had just closed the pass right behind me because the snow had gotten so bad. And I was in an SUV, but I was coming from Arizona, so it wasn't a four-wheel drive SUV.
Okay.
So I looked like a wiper blade on the road.
Yeah.
I looked like a wiper blade.
Yeah.
And if I was sitting there, the snow is so high, I was going to run into the guardrail without knowing it. And so I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm 100%. I've messed up that bad. I'm going to die. And so that's when I realized I need to slow down. I need to, figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to this. And then blue and orange lights appeared behind me. And so I'm a huge Broncos fan, so I'm thinking, okay, the Bronco Angels are coming to save me.
The Broncos are saving me.
It turns out that we have this thing called snow plows in Denver that when snow comes out, snow plows happen.
Right.
And so the snow plows, come up behind me, get around me, go in front of me, and I follow it down the whole mountain, and I realized that snowplow probably saved my life that day. And in that moment, I realized I was going to a new city, and I didn't have the wherewithal, I didn't have the financial, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know what the heck was going on, so I needed a metaphorical snowplow. Okay. I needed somebody who'd been there before, someone who could push the snow, the frustration, the adversity out of the way so that I could follow in their path for a little bit. So I started calling all the other studios, how can I help? I started saying, who are the players in Denver? Can I be an engineer? I was asking people, can I be an intern? The biggest studio at the time was a company called Side 3, and I still have the email of me asking them, can I please be your intern? And now he is a minority business partner in one of my colleges in downtown Denver.
Incredible.
So the person I was asking, can I be your intern, is now one of my business partners, and he's a good friend of mine. Our wives hang out.
So amazing.
He wouldn't even answer my emails a decade ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that why we have threes show up all the time in our company, because in the final percent, we have a rule, like the rule of three, if you will.
Okay.
We always think that you should be in the middle.
Yes.
You should have a mentor, and then you should be a mentee. Or sorry, you should. I'll get it. You should be a mentor, so you're leading, and then you should also be a mentee, so that you can always know what it looks like to lead and follow.
Yes.
And that's one thing, people think that they get so smart they stop following.
Big mistake.
I had kind of been.
So you're telling me you have a coach? Greg
Absolutely.
Kimball has a coach?
I have to have a coach. If I'm selling the product of coaching, I have to believe in it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most important things that you can do. And
100%.
And the crazy thing is, I consider myself a pretty expensive coach, and my coach is way more expensive than me, but it's because he's been there before.
Yeah.
And there's certain distinctions and insights that he's able to help me do. And the other thing that is really important from our standpoint from marriage is we never coach each other. So I don't coach my wife.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't coach me. She has her own coach.
Yes.
And if she wants to share with me certain insights that she gets out of that, awesome. If not, awesome.
Yeah.
But we support the coaching principles and ideas, and we want to let our marriage be our marriage first. And we think that that's really important. Therefore, just because, I'm so addicted to reading books, I could suggest a book, but I'm never going to say you should do this, because that's not my job.
Right.
One of the things that we do is we practice a thing called Gestalt. If we're going to try to coach each other, we have to be able to do it out of an experience. So if she asks me a question, hey, Greg, this is happening, blah, 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 I would say, when I was talking to someone in that same kind of situation, here's how I responded to them. This is what they did. I hope that helps.
Yes.
Instead of this is what you should do.
This is what you should do.
And I think young coaches and young teachers, parents, different things like that, if you can if you can start leading from experiences first without saying the word should,
Yes.
it is really important, because not only are you shoulding all over yourself, you install that word in their vocabulary
Yes.
to where they're like, oh, I should have been better.
Yes.
Oh, I should have done this. I
Yes.
should have done that. And
what's behind that word is judgment,
yes.
force,
Yes.
not good things, shame.
Shame. And I think we self-shame and sabotage ourselves far too often, far too many times. And I think that if we can give ourselves a little bit of grace,
Yeah.
I think it's important. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they try to burn the candle at both ends, and then they think it's cool. The thing is if we give ourselves grace to get to rest, grace is a pass for rest. But we have to understand that grace is a path to laziness. And if we understand that things can start out good, but the path where they can leave you, if you go from, I'm working, I give myself some grace, I'm going to take some rest, then I get comfortable, then I get lazy.
Yeah.
Laziness deserves zero grace.
Right.
And that's something that has been ingrained in me. And the mentors and the coaches, and a lot of times, because I'm working in multiple areas of life, believe it or not.
Yes, you are.
I actually have more than one coach, which
I love it.
I think people need, because there are different perspectives. And for you to gain, this is why we're doing the conference, the summit, so that people can come and look at a lot of philosophies, look at a lot of people. And there might be a time where, if I'm a plane to get you from A to B, I'm one vehicle. For your particular situation, Katie might be a freaking spaceship. And so it's just like, well, do you want to go on a plane or a spaceship? I think a lot of people, for that circumstance, they want the spaceship.
Yeah.
But there's some people out there who are working on and in the wrong vehicles. Like, they're trying to get to Hawaii from California, but they have a car.
Right.
And they're never going to get there.
Never
They
gonna
just
get there.
they need to understand where they're going. And one of the first things that you had said to me, and when I said, what does coaching mean to you? And immediately you were talking about clarity, like getting clear on where you're going, who you are, alignment. And it's so important, because if you don't know where you're going, one of the things that I love, Jim Rohn said, he says, in 5 years, you're going to arrive. In 5 years, you show up.
Yes.
Where?
Yeah.
You're going to either arrive to a well-designed life or an undesigned life. You tell
Right.
me which one you think is
That
going to be better.
time passes regardless. Yeah.
Yeah, you show up.
Yeah.
And if you don't show up, then it really doesn't matter.
No.
It might as well have been a well-designed life. And I think that that's one of the things that's important, is having those conversations with the right people. And, how I ended up. And so, the full story, after Tim's story changes my life,
Yes.
and I go,
Yeah.
hey, you know what, I'm going to be a speaker. And then, it goes a little bit further, and I finally know what I'm going to talk about. There's this guy named Coach Bert, and I'm messaging him on Instagram, and he's kind of giving me the normal stuff that people do, because he doesn't know who I am, he finally agrees to take a meeting with me because he's going to be in Colorado.
Okay.
But the thing is he's 2.5 hours away in Vail, Colorado. And so I just drive there for a lunch meeting, because I take action.
Yes.
So I drove up there, we had a great meeting, and I left with no speaking gigs, no insight, no anything. I just made a connection.
Yeah.
Now, this may be good, maybe bad. I have no idea. But what happens next is he calls me and he says, do you do any speaking? And I said, absolutely, because now I have this concept. Let's try it out. And he had this.
And you'd made the decision that yes.
And he has this, what he called the Monster Cruise. He rents out this big cruise ship. And we go do a personal growth conference on a cruise ship, which that's like my first real speaking gig.
Wow.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like, all right, so this is kind of cool. He gives me the absolute worst spot after everyone had come back from dinner. They're all, borderline drunk and this.
Okay.
But I own the room. I deliver the message, and it's great. And so then he calls me up about 6 months after that, and this is when COVID started hitting, and he had 2 tours, Conquer the Crisis and the Comeback Tour. And he said, do you want to go on tour with me? And I said, absolutely I do. Who else is going to be on the tour? And he said, I'm going with myself, Sharon Lecter, and Tim Story.
Oh, my word.
So the person who gave me the idea to become a speaker, I end up on tour with him.
Wow.
And I go on tour with him, and now he's a good personal friend of mine, and he's coming to the summit.
And Sharon.
Who is also a great personal friend of mine.
Yeah.
And so then these are the people now that I'm learning from. How do you deliver your message? How do you make it in the personal growth space?
Yeah.
How do you sustain? I mean, these are people, Tim Story's Oprah's life coach, Robert Downey Jr.'s life coach, Grant Cardone's life coach, Stevie Wonder, Kanye, he's the coach of the stars. Sharon Lecter is responsible for 34 million books sold. So when I'm writing my next book, now that I have her in my friend Rolodex, if you will,
yes,
that's who I talk to. I made that connection all because I said, you know what? I'm going to drive to Vail and just have a lunch meeting. And nothing happened from that lunch meeting for like a month or 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
It was just, I made a connection.
Yeah.
And then it just started happening. You're one conversation away from changing your entire life.
Greg, this is absolutely incredible. And like in just telling your story, you're teaching us a lot of principles, and you're showing us what that means to take action and not just be a talking head and say what we want and dream and wish we had in our life, but you're putting that insight into action.
Absolutely.
Right? So I have a final question for you.
Alrighty.
And it's actually the question that you started with when you interviewed me on your podcast. You've shared some incredible stories here, and we've learned that you're a performer, you're a musical creator and composer, you are a speaker on stages, you have colleges. Yeah. What? Yeah. Like you have all of these things going, and you're a coach.
Yes.
Why coaching? Why? Like you have enough going on in your life, and coaching is not time efficient.
No,
it's not.
It's the worst from a pure business standpoint.
Yes,
it's one of the worst uses of your time.
Yes,
but from a spirit standpoint, it's one of the best uses of my time, and it goes back to that snowplow story. I know that there's a bunch of people out there like me that need me. I'm not better or worse than them.
Sure.
I'm just further up the road.
Yes.
And there's people on my road that are further up and I get help from too. And I'm going to be a snowplow for those people because I think especially the creatives of the world and entrepreneurs, don't get it wrong. You are creative forces in this world. We think that, musical artists and all those are the only, that's not true.
Yeah.
Speakers, anything that takes a little bit of art in their design, like your product, you're a creator. The problem is we are so misunderstood in today's society, and I learned this in running colleges. We tend to try to console and control creative people. Oh, no, it's okay, you're a little different. Oh, it's okay this. You need to do this. You need to do that. And then we control them because we don't want them to get too big too fast. I want to equip creative people, and I want to let them explore. So I'm here to equip creative individuals to make and design the life that they always knew was inside of them.
Yes.
And what we call it, to live an exponential life, you have to identify your potential. It's the variable inside of you that is like your superpower. And we're just trying to get you to stop being Clark Kent, start being Superman.
Yeah.
Or Superwoman.
Yeah.
Take off the glasses and take flight. And if we can go the final percent for ourselves, we can go the final percent for a lot of other people. And I think that that's important. It's like the airplane principle. Put your mask on first.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had no choice in the matter. When I took coaching seriously, I asked the question, and I played full out every single time I'm with a client, and I am there to change them. I am never there to console them. I am there to equip them. And sometimes equipping hurts. Sometimes equipping is tough, but I am never going to try to make you feel better. I am always going to try to make you be better.
So good. Such an important distinction.
Absolutely.
Greg, one of the things that I love about you is you live the principles that you're teaching,
100%.
right? And including being coached yourself and doing all of the work that you do and going the final percent.
Yes.
So thank you for being an example of that,
Absolutely.
truly. And bringing hope to everybody, right?
Yes.
Who's listening to this, who's feeling like they've done the 99% and are feeling like, is this ever going to work? Should I give up? What's the gap? What's the difference? And understanding the difference
Just don't
between
quit.
that. final percent.
Just don't quit. And that's the thing, you know. And don't be stingy with your dreams. I think that's another thing. People think that everyone's going to steal your thoughts, steal your dreams, steal your energy. Most people don't take action. So it's okay to talk about what you're going to do. Most people are not like Katie, where they're just like, I'm going to go the final percent. So getting a sounding board, instead of waiting for perfection before you tell your dream, telling your friends, your family, even if it's ridicule or criticism, there can be important information in there that can help you adapt whatever you're trying to do to be better, so that you don't think you're perfect and then you get crushed when you give it to the market and then you find out all of those things.
Yeah.
So don't be so scared to share that exponential inside of you, your spirit, your light, and don't be scared to try to light other people, because, like, you know, we talk about that church principle. You lighting someone else does not diminish your flame.
So incredible. Greg, you're an incredible speaker. I'm excited to come to your event and speak. How can everybody who's listening to us right now, what's the best way for them to kind of connect with you in your world?
So go to thefinalpercent.com, all spelled out, thefinalpercent.com, and you can check out some of, whether it's courses you want. We have a completely free course that's a month, and it's full. It's not a loss leader. You don't get, hit with, now buy this. There's no upsell. There's no one-time offer. There's no bumps, nothing. It's literally a free course, and if you like that course, sign up for some of the other ones. My podcast is The Final Percent, and then if you want to connect with me on any social media, it's just at Greg Kimball, and that's GregKimble.
Awesome. Greg, thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you, and
Thank you.
Excited to come speak at your event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Okay.